Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome everyone. I'm Glenda McDonald, General Manager, Representative Member Services for the Law Society. ILANZ and the NZLS are committed to connecting, supporting and leading the in-house lawyer community. It's great to have so many of you here. I see at least 100 have already joined. It's going to be a very relaxed and informal kōrero, and before I hand over to our moderator, Abigail Milburn, Practical Law New Zealand Lead at Thomson Reuters, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the recent passing of Sir Ian Barker. Sir Ian made a substantial contribution to both the New Zealand Law Society and the legal profession, serving as patron of the In-House Lawyers Association, ILANZ, since its inception. Sir Ian served as a judge of the High Court for 21 years, retiring in 1997. His special and thoughtful demeanour and love of the law and its people was a hallmark of his career, and he will be remembered as one of New Zealand's most outstanding jurists. His passing is a significant loss to his family and friends, to the Law Society and the whole profession. We send our kind thoughts to all those mourning Sir Ian. Could we please now just take a moment and observe for a minute's silence to commemorate Sir Ian. Thank you, everyone. And now I'd like to hand over to Abigail and also take this moment to thank Thomson Reuters for partnering with ILANZ on this webinar today. Thank you, Abigail.
Thanks, Glenda. Kia ora koutou katoa. Welcome, everybody. As Glenda said, my name is Abigail Milburn and I'm Practical Law New Zealand Lead at Thomson Reuters. And I'm delighted to be moderating what promises to be a very interesting kōrero today. I'd like to start by introducing our panelists. So we have Hayden Wilson, who is Chair and Partner at Dentons, Kensington, Swan in Wellington. Grant Pritchard, ILANZ President and Customer Legal Business Partner at Spark New Zealand in Auckland.
Kia ora.
And Joyce Chiu, New Zealand Law Society National New Lawyers Committee Member and in-house legal counsel at the Real Estate Institute of New Zealand in Auckland.
Hi,
Thank
everyone.
you all for joining us today.
Kia ora.
Before we get started, I just need to outline a few administrative matters. We will hopefully have time for a few questions from the audience at the end of the webinar, and thank you to those who've sent in a couple of questions in advance as well. If you do have questions, could you please pop them in the Q&A chat and we'll see how we go at the end. There will also be some poll questions popping up during the webinar. And your answers to these questions will be anonymous, so you can tell us what you really think. So the theme for today's discussion is, what does 2023 look like for in-house lawyers in Aotearoa? And the topics we're going to be focusing on are the impact of the New Zealand legal brain drain, the state of the New Zealand in-house legal market, and resulting burnout and mental health issues. So let's kick off our discussion with our first poll question. Over to you, Jake. So poll question 1. Do you agree that the legal brain drain from New Zealand has been greater than normal in 2022? Yes or no? I see we're not allowed to vote.
I think they figure we get to tell you what we think anyway.
Yeah. So hopefully those poll answers will pop up shortly. Maybe while we're waiting for those poll answers to pop up, I'll start with a question for you, Hayden. You commented earlier this year that rather than seeing the legal brain drain from New Zealand as a threat, we should be doing more to facilitate getting overseas lawyers working here. Could you comment a bit further on that, please?
Absolutely. I think where I'd start is I'm not sure. I'd be interested to see the poll results, but I'm not sure that the legal brain drain has been more significant this year than normal. I think part of it is that we're measuring it against an abnormal period, which was, the particularly intense parts of COVID that obviously we're still going through. And what we've seen and what I see in the market is a bit more of a reversion to the mean. We're going back to the way it was, and there has perhaps been a little bit of pent up demand from people who haven't been able to go overseas. But I also think that, as New Zealand becomes and continues to become more of a global, a player in the global economy, we make it very, very hard for overseas lawyers, even from very similar jurisdictions, to come to New Zealand. And what that means is that when, as traditionally particularly young New Zealand lawyers do, is they work for a few years and then they want to go and explore the world and they want to go and try different things, that we don't have a countervailing group of people coming back into New Zealand at those similar levels. So we end up with this gap at the sort of mid-tier of our experience levels, and that's a problem. And given that most New Zealand businesses that I work with and most international businesses working in New Zealand that I work with are operating both in New Zealand law and in international environments, it does seem to me that we could very usefully make it easier for overseas qualified lawyers to practice here in New Zealand, whether it's in-house or in firms.
Hmm.
And I see the results.
Yeah.
The results are pretty close, actually.
Yeah. So 58% agree with the question and 42% disagrees. Yeah, so interesting. A bit of a...
The other question I pose is, do we actually think that the shortages in New Zealand in the legal market are any different from the shortages in the hospitality market, in the construction market? And, are we actually really any different?
What do you think, Grant?
Yeah, I mean, certainly from an in-house perspective, I think we've got similar challenges in terms of keeping the unicorn 5-year plus PQE lawyers in country. And certainly from my own experience, getting in working overseas, it was frightfully easy. It was just sort of like ticking the box. There was a couple of stamps that had to be completed, and then I was off and away. And I think in New Zealand, I mean, unless you're coming in under the Trans-Tasman Mutual Recognition Act, it is very, very hard for you. So we've got a lot of very experienced legal minds in New Zealand that can't practice without jumping through a lot of hoops and doing lots of university papers, which is not great. And I think there's more that we can do to make that easy. From all of the main Commonwealth countries and common law countries, it should be relatively easy to come to New Zealand and practice law.
Yeah. I still remember being really offended when I sat the UK solicitor's qualification that I had to do an ethics paper, as if we didn't know what we were doing on the ethics front. I think it's
the same thing
ethics,
at this end, I imagine, too.
Ethics and property. Just, yeah. Joyce, you are our representative from the younger generation. So what's your perspective on this? What do you think's going to happen in 2023 in terms of the legal brain drain, if in fact there is a legal brain drain?
I think the topic is definitely really common amongst my peers, probably because we are the ones that are leaving. So it's definitely broached a lot, and you hear it from friends and peers all the time. I really do think if we're going to be predicting that kind of statistics, it's probably going to get a little worse in early 2023 before it gets better. As Hayden already mentioned, it's really due to the factor of COVID. We've been pent up. It's actually really natural for our age group, 0 to 7 years PQE, to want to go overseas and do the whole OE, to work for a couple of years. I think the issue right now, it's really hard to tell who's going to be going overseas for a year or two, or who will be going overseas for about 5 or 10 years. You know, it makes a really big difference. But I think for young professionals, me personally, even if I wanted to go overseas, it's due to the lifestyle, right? It's due to the flexibility in working. I can travel while that happens. And you couple that with the kind of negative economic downturn that you're hearing from mainstream media. I mean, if you think we have a cost of living crisis, I mean, that just makes 2020 year, there's a greater pull to go overseas. But on a positive note, I think most people our age always say we want to come back. So for the in-house sector, it's really about kind of planning, attracting, giving that incentive for us to come back, because this is home and it's where we do want to work eventually when we make that decision.
Yeah, that all makes sense. And I think, I mean, I can see a real use case for practical law in terms of mitigating the effect of that missing middle, you know, the 3 to 8 year PQE, because that impacts the whole team. It impacts, you know, those at the bottom of the team who are having to step up and do more difficult work than perhaps they've had to without the support of a mentor from that that sort of mid-level lawyer. But it also impacts those at the top of the team who are maybe having to step in and do a bit more research and drafting than they might have had to do for a few years. So I think practical laws content, which is, you know, constantly updated, and practical can really fit in there.
And we have to acknowledge, I think, that this isn't a bad thing. It causes pressures, but those lawyers who go overseas, or even the ones who don't go overseas but go from being in-house to out-house, or from out-house to in-house, they're gaining different experiences. They're gaining different perspectives, and ultimately that makes them better lawyers. Some of them go and do policy work. You know, that makes for more rounded lawyers and more rounded people at the more senior levels. The challenge that we have is, how do we fill that gap? And technology helps with that, but also having a bigger pool of people to fill those slots and to get that experience and take them back to their own countries, that also helps with that. And as a profession, I think we should be more open to it.
And also making it easy for Kiwi in-house lawyers to come back. I mean, Spark made it really easy for me to come back to New Zealand to fit into the team. It was a pretty easy path. And I was only in Australia, it was pretty easy, but I do think we can do more to be looking overseas and luring people back from overseas, because a lot of people do want to come home. It's just a matter of timing. And so if we've got our field of view, if you will, a bit wider, and we're not just looking locally, we can get a richer pool of candidates who, if you give them a bit of a nudge, might be quite keen to come back to the motherland.
So Hayden, I didn't realise you were an outhouse lawyer.
Yes, it's better than the alternative. No, that's there's a joke from our session at the ILANZ conference that I won't repeat here. But yes, what do you call private practice lawyers if in-house is the commercial alternative? But Grant's point is a really good one, and it's something that we've been doing a lot of thinking about as well. You know, we're part of a global firm, and we're working on ways to allow people to shift around the world. And at the moment we can do that. We're about to launch a sort of short-term mobility program here in New Zealand that allows lawyers to move around from New Zealand to Australia to the Middle East. But the possibilities for doing that on any kind of longer-term basis are restricted by the regulatory choices that we've made here in New Zealand. And they may well have been right for the time, but I'm not sure they're right for the modern world that we're in. We do have, and we should acknowledge, there are some particular things about New Zealand that all lawyers need to understand. People need to have an understanding of Te Ao Māori and the impact of the treaty on the work that we do. But we should be able to find ways to allow people to upskill with that while they're still doing what they are presently good.
Yeah. I'm now going to share some international survey results from Thomson Reuters 2022 Legal Department Operations Index, and this ties in with the comment that you made, Hayden, about technology. So the data in the report comes from 1,500 corporate law departments who were surveyed in August and September, including in New Zealand. One of the key findings in the report is that 71% of those surveyed see using technology to simplify workflow as a high priority. However, more than 20% of the survey respondents said that their existing technology was underused. So let's take our second poll question on that, and remember your answers are anonymous. So Jake, can you pop up our second poll question, please? Poll question 2. Is using technology to simplify workflow a high priority for your team? Yes or no? So I think we'll carry on just because it does seem to take a while to get those responses through. So starting with you, Grant, you describe yourself on LinkedIn as a technology enthusiast. How is your team using technology to work smarter?
Should have updated my LinkedIn profile, sorry. Yeah, so look, I think there's every team in New Zealand, the in-house teams, obviously we're grappling with pressure on budgets, on team size, on needs to drive efficiency. And so there's probably two things that I'm seeing, and it's sort of being lived out in my wider legal team at the moment, but better using the tools that we've got available to us in terms of managing work, managing priorities and workflows. So you can invest in specialist solutions for doing that. So for example, Spark is deploying LawView at the moment, a specialist tool for managing in-house work. That's proving to be pretty good so far in terms of my experience using the tool, but also using what you've got. Not every team is going to have that in the budget right now, but you can use Microsoft Planner or Trello, you can use Miro boards, you can use Microsoft Whiteboard. There's a lot of technology tools you can use for capturing ideas, making decisions, planning and managing work. And so it's up to each team to kind of maybe just spend the time at your next team offsite. If you're a sole in-house counsel, there are a few of those that'll be watching now. You'll have a very lonely offsite, but just have a think about how you're using technology to manage the work and to do it effectively and as efficiently as you can, because the work's not going away. And so part of it is about how do you use the technology to reduce the level of inbound work by getting your clients to self-serve, and then efficiently managing the stuff that you really do need to look at and being on the lookout constantly for, I don't know if it's the dross work, the work that's sort of repetitive, quite low complexity, and looking for opportunities to automate that, or to empower your clients and your stakeholders to have the tools and templates that they need to be able to do their thing without having legal as a bottleneck.
Thanks for that, Grant. So the results of the poll, 63% agree that using technology is a high priority and 37% disagree. So again, not too pretty close there. Joyce, did you have anything you wanted to add on this particular topic?
I definitely agree with the poll answers there. I think all in-house lawyers probably would like to go further in technology, obviously, if the budget would let us. Everyone has the like contract management system that's in place, the really normal renewal dates that it reminds you of. But I think when I started in-house as a young professional, I didn't realize the amount of internal meetings that needed to occur between your different teams. At REINZ, we only have 3 in-house legal counsels, and then we support the internal teams as well as all our memberships. So it's a lot of work, and sometimes a single say an event that needs a sponsorship deal, that can take multiple meetings to ensure you get everyone's intentions in place. So I would be in full support of anything that makes legal work a little more accessible to every employee at the office effectively. It helps them in terms of explaining what their intentions are, so that legal just do a final, kind of like a proof at the really end to make sure everything's in place. But yes, everything to effectively cancel down the administration would be great.
Thanks for that, Joyce. Hayden, what do you think about the statistic on the underuse of technology, and how do you think better adoption of technology by lawyers is best driven?
Yeah, I was a bit surprised by that poll result, actually. I thought that there would be a much greater number of people saying that technology, using technology to simplify workflow was a higher priority for their teams. It's interesting coming from an external perspective, looking at what some of the in-house teams are doing, and some of it is really quite revolutionary. It's fair to say that the out-house community, the legal community particularly, and the external lawyers community specifically, are pretty slow adopters of technology. But one of the challenges that we face is that, you might have a suite of 10 different clients who are all looking to use technology to simplify their workflow. Sometimes that means that you're having to deal with 10 different systems, and you're expected to be as up to speed with them as your in-house clients are. And so I suppose a plea for people who are in-house looking to use technology is to engage with your external providers early and talk to them about how they can integrate with that, so that it can actually be really effective. And you're entitled to expect that your external lawyers will keep up with what you're doing, but they're also seeing what other people are doing and can potentially bring some relevant context to the decisions that your teams are making.
And I think for me, coming from practical law, I think half the battle is actually getting busy lawyers to take time out of their day to look at some of these options that are out there. And I certainly think that once people look at practical law, they're usually hooked. Let's focus now on how some of these issues may be affecting our mental health and well-being. So it's time for our last anonymous poll. Jake, if you could pop that up. Poll question number 3. Do any of the following apply to you? A, my team is under-resourced. B, I am overworked. C, I sometimes feel out of my depth. D, I sometimes feel burnt out. E, all of the above. And F, none of the above. So we'll close that and move on to Joyce. What are your thoughts on how some of the issues we've discussed today are impacting on the mental health and well-being of younger lawyers?
So under the New Zealand Law Society, we do have a new national new lawyers group, or I hope some of you have heard of it, NZLS for short. I think health and mental well-being, it is commonly talked about, and it's a topical issue that comes up between us and the group. And though I don't speak for young lawyers, and neither does the group, I think except for the one where it says burnt out as an option, I hope that's not an option for young lawyers. But I think all of those aboves in your poll would be really commonly felt in young lawyers. If not, they're a continuous loop. So if you feel out of depth, all of a sudden you need to overwork to make sure you catch up, and it just becomes continuous. So at the NZLS group, so there is a group of us who are in charge of like the health and well-being side and advocacy. So they're currently working on a kind of a new lawyer kind of information hub to be hosted by the New Zealand Law Society. So they're working together to put that together, especially for young lawyers. So there's a place that you can go and find information or sources or know where to talk to. So that's above and beyond the New Zealand Law Society's kind of employee assistant programs that they already have in place. Oh, my pop-up. And then I guess we're also producing a bit of a cheat sheet and new podcasts that will come to light just to discuss what young lawyers every day they face with their mental health and well-being, especially like if you need to talk about performance reviews. There's certainly not something you can find as a student and then as a professional, because it can be an awkward conversation. So all these things are being put together because we do understand how important your profession is and how it does affect your mental health and well-being, and how the two are quite interrelated. And for that reason, it's just like a really important topic to us.
Yeah, that hub sounds amazing, and like it will be a really useful resource. So we're just looking at the results here. We do have 36 respondents saying they sometimes feel burnt out. 36 of respondents saying their team is under-resourced. Yeah, but 12% none of the above. So
we need to figure out where these people are working and join them.
Hayden, what's your perspective on this as a people manager?
It's something that we've had a huge amount of focus on, you know, in the medium term, but also particularly right now. I mean, I think the reality is that everyone is tired and worn down by the last 2.5 years. They're tired and worn down by the fact that it's November and there's not that many days left before Christmas. But as a profession, we genuinely have to be better at this. We have to be better at creating relationships and work environments that are effective for our people in the long term, because people who are overworked, who are out of their depth, who are feeling burnt out, well, they just simply don't do good work, and they can't sustain doing it for periods of time. So you put aside the basic human decency element of it. We're in difficult jobs where we're asked to make really important decisions for our clients. We can't do that if we're not at our best. And that's a conversation that the Law Society and the profession has been having for some time, and it needs to keep happening. And it needs to find a way to navigate how we deliver what we're asked to deliver in a way that, you know, we can be at our best.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that you make, Hayden, that, I mean, how can you expect people to produce good work if they're not feeling good? Grant, I understand you've been working on a healthy briefing charter at ILANZ that you hope is going to launch next year in 2023. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Sure thing. This has been a long time coming, actually, but it's the healthy briefing charter. It's just a set of guidelines and a toolkit that aims to foster a healthier approach to briefing and communication and relationships between in-house lawyers, private practice lawyers and barristers. And the goal is to just reduce or minimize sources of unhealthy stress and to promote better mental health and well-being at work. The law can be a challenging and rewarding career choice, but I think our legal training and our workplace cultures can create an environment where unhealthy stress and work practices can become the norm. So it's just about making an intentional choice to foster healthier work culture and communication. So that could be things like delegating, briefing and performing legal work. It could be about relationships or communications between in-house teams and the private practice lawyers that support us. And I think the key thing is it's about not aiming for perfection, but progress. So we recognize that the purpose of this charter is not a quick fix. It's an ongoing journey. It's a conversation. We're not going to completely eliminate the stress and pressure that might be involved in legal practice, but we can do more. And I'm really keen to finalize that, to publish it, and to get New Zealand workplaces on board with it.
That sounds great. We'll watch out for that in 2023. And so a reminder that everyone who's attending today will receive a complimentary copy of Practical Law New Zealand's Mental Health and Wellbeing for Lawyers toolkit. And it's a guide to practical law's content on mental health and wellbeing issues in the legal industry and for legal professionals. So we hope you enjoy that. And we're also pleased to be able to offer you a free 1-week trial of Practical Law Global Premium. And this will give you access to all practical law content and tools from all geographies, including New Zealand. So hope you take advantage of that too. The relevant links, I believe, are going to be shared in the chat now, and they'll also be sent to you by email after the webinar. So keep an eye on your inbox. Great. Well, it looks like... Sorry,
Abigail, I was just going to say there's a question that's just popped up on the chat that fits in with this discussion. It's from Jenny, who's asking, how is hybrid working impacting on wellbeing and culture in your experience? It's a fascinating question because it's very much a two-sided coin. From our experience, you know, having flexibility and being able to work in a hybrid way advances well-being in a lot of ways by making it easier for people to live their lives while they're also working and taking out some of that some of the stresses that are involved in going into an office. But it's also a challenge for well-being and culture, because you can't necessarily see people every day and see how their everyday work stress, their everyday life stress is impacting on them. And it's something that the Law Society noted a lot after the Christchurch earthquakes, when all of the law firms in Christchurch went from being mostly located in the centre of town to being spread across the city. People lost those kind of interactions with people at the post box or at the Law Society or at the Law Library, and you didn't get to see the stress that was happening on people, and you didn't have the opportunity to intervene. So it's a real challenge, and it has pluses and minuses, and it's here to stay. So we have to figure it out.
Yeah, and Joyce, can you maybe share your perspective, because I think you know, that it might differ in terms of your perspective on hybrid working and the, you know, some of the downsides of that.
I think at REINZ, we did conduct a survey across all the teams, all the people that work here, the staff, in terms of what flexibility actually looks like. And I honestly, from a young person's perspective, think it's probably the most important piece of work we've done this year. It really did help the culture. I think flexibility really means really different things to everybody involved. For young people, for a young professional, I think it's having that choice to come in when needed. And obviously our senior staff managers, if they wanted people to come in into the office to have meetings, they would put that up to the team. And then a good compromise actually came out of that kind of survey. We do work in a hybrid environment at REINZ with certain days that we're required to come in. And I think that does work really well. And for a lot of people, flexibility didn't just mean if you wanted to work from home or work from office. I mean, some people have kids, they want to leave early to attend some of their kids' events. We have people at our office who are really into the gym, and their personal training can only happen at a certain time. And I think that's fair enough. It allows you to work your lifestyle as long as you get the work done. I don't see an issue with that.
Grant, how about you? Have you got any thoughts on the hybrid working phenomenon?
Yeah, I just think you kind of need to make sure that it's a win for everybody, like a win for you as an individual lawyer, a win for your team, and a win for your organization. So that means, you know, making sure that people's needs are met, but that you've got a good bit of balance. So for example, in my team, we've got certain days of the week where we all tend to come in, because otherwise, if we didn't coordinate it all, you'd be coming into the office to be on Teams calls all day with your teammates who are all at home, and we'd never see each other. So that's worked really well. And you know, I think inherently you need to be flexible about the flexible working. And so having too many rules can make it hard to for that to work well for everybody.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I feel like we've hit a good sweet spot, certainly in my team and in my workplace. Everyone's sort of trying things on for size, right? But it feels like we're now sort of beyond the get everyone back into the office mode. Well, that's what I'm feeling. I'm not sure if that's the case for everyone.
There's a particular challenge in the legal profession that this does throw up, and we are an apprenticeship profession. You don't learn how to be a lawyer by going to law school. You learn to be a lawyer by being a lawyer and watching people do it and learning from it. And that's possible in a hybrid environment, but it requires really intentional thinking about how you're going to achieve that. And it also requires, as Grant's point is absolutely right, it's got to be a win for everyone. It's also got to be an investment for everyone. You know, if you are out of the office, as I am quite often, you actually have to be really intentional about your engagement with people and keeping that engagement up, or else it does start to sort of fray those edges of the culture.
Great. Well, that was actually a question from the chat, and we've got time. Luckily, that's great. We've got lots of time to deal with some of the other questions that have come through. So I'll just start taking a look at those. But I think one that came through before, Grant, which might be a good one for you. Do you think the independent review, the New Zealand Law Society independent review, will result in any key regulatory changes for in-house lawyers?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I can imagine that there will be some changes. It's just hard to predict the exact nature of those. You know, one of the things that, and I think ILANZ potentially is about to publish its independent review commentary on its website. We've been asked to do that by a member, and we agree with the need to be transparent about this kind of thing. And so one of the things that we've commented on is that difficulty with having 3,500 in-house lawyers who can't really do pro bono work. And so that may be something that comes out of it, is having a bit more of a brightly lit path and an easier path for in-house lawyers to give back in terms of access to justice and thinking beyond our own kind of day-to-day, you know, Grant as a spark lawyer type needs. But you can expect for there to be, I imagine, some meaningful changes to the profession. I just don't know exactly what the in-house side of things will look like. I'm sure it'll be positive, given that we've now got 28% of the profession here in New Zealand practicing in-house.
Thanks for that, Grant. So a question for you, Joyce. In relation to the state of the New Zealand legal market, what are effective ways to encourage New Zealand employers to stop seeing in-house lawyers as specialists in every area of law?
That's actually a question probably Hayden or Grant would be in a better position to answer. Would you guys like to take over?
Do you want me to read it out again? Or?
Yes, please.
Yep. In relation to the state of the New Zealand legal market, what are effective ways to encourage New Zealand employers to stop seeing in-house lawyers as specialists in every area of law?
Hopefully they don't. So I might try and answer that. I mean, I feel like that's something for the in-house team to manage in terms of the expectations. You know, I mean, I think about my day-to-day job as a lawyer, and when I brief to an external firm, it's because we absolutely don't have the capacity to do this work on time and there's an urgency to it, or because there's a need for specialist advice. And so I definitely do brief and don't try and, you can be an excellent generalist, I think, as an in-house lawyer. And depending on how big your team is, you might have a chance to specialize. You know, if you're big enough to have a dedicated property lawyer in your team, that's fantastic. But you won't have a dedicated specialist in every area of the law, your in-house team. So that's why we need great partnerships with our external firms and lawyers that support us.
Sorry to put you on the spot there, Joyce. Just looking through to see whether there's some more questions that we can.
There's a question on the Q&A for Grant, which came in very early, which is about what sort of things. Yeah,
I was like, should I answer this?
Go on.
Number one, pay your in-house lawyers well, and number two, give them packages in terms of getting them back to New Zealand that will help them to get here and to thrive. I think I won't go into too much detail on that, but you know, there's certainly some simple ways that you can make it easy for an overseas-based in-house lawyer to come back to New Zealand, and Spark did that for me. So, but I think it's about offering competitive packages and selling the dream. I think in terms of making it easy to return. I mean, these lawyers that you're reaching out to overseas, especially. I mean, Hayden, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but it feels like we're tending to mainly get Kiwi lawyers coming back to New Zealand to practice, rather than tens of thousands of foreign qualified lawyers coming here, and that's partially because of how the rules are set up. But it's almost like you need those sort of 100% pure New Zealand law ads to remind people of how awesome New Zealand is, and then just get them here.
I mean, we have seen, and we do have, senior lawyers coming back who are not New Zealand qualified, and are coming to New Zealand for what New Zealand offers. They're certainly not coming to New Zealand in-house jobs or New Zealand private practice jobs because the salary is remarkably competitive versus what they can get New York or London, right? That's just not feasible. But that's not, and if this goes to one of the other questions that's in the chat, you know, that a competitive remuneration package is measured against what it costs to live in the country, and what the other benefits of the place bring in terms of the quality of work that you can do, quality of people that you're working with, what your options are outside of work, rather than being compared, you know, Wellington versus New York. And so what we find is we get a lot of people who have gone overseas because they want experience, they want to do new things. As Joyce said, they want to travel, and one of the challenges about New Zealand is we're a long way from any sort of travel opportunities. And they want to do that for a period of time, and then they want to come back to New Zealand, either because their family is here, or because they think that New Zealand is a better place to bring up a family, or they want to take some of those skills and you know, use them in a New Zealand environment where they might get more access to, you know, key decision makers, be more closely involved in business decisions than they might be able to in an in-house job somewhere overseas. And for us, it's about highlighting the benefits of coming back to New Zealand, and then not having a regulatory environment that makes it difficult for them to do so. Particularly if, you know, they are from, you know, if they're not New Zealanders and they want to come here, if they're coming from those Commonwealth countries, you know, what can we do to encourage that?
Yeah, that seems to be a pretty key theme that's coming across this morning, doesn't it? How can we make that? How can we flip this on its head? So we're not looking at the people leaving, but we're looking at who we can bring back. Just looking at the chat again, and panel, feel free to jump in if there's any that you particularly want to deal with.
I can jump in on the public sector. not that I'm qualified. Sorry, we've got it's anonymous attendee. It's a great question, and obviously I've never worked in the public sector, so I'm speaking completely off the cuff here. But I think, depending on what else you can package into the overall benefits package for the lawyers, that could help. But I actually think it's a very difficult question to answer without, I mean, you kind of need to go to market and pay as much as you can at a market level to be able to retain those more senior lawyers. And it's almost unavoidable. I mean, if you talk to a legal recruiter, they'll say, well, for a, you know, 7 to 10 year PQE, you know, in-house lawyer in Wellington, it's looking like this, it's looking like that. And so if you can't pay to that level, there'll be a systemic struggle to fill those gaps. And that's where that business case situation can come in to say, look, hey, we've had 2 or 3 roles outstanding now for 6 months, you know, based on our research in terms of the legal market through recruitment specialists, this is where we need to be paying. And so we need to have a look at this for the next year's budget, or do something as a band-aid to get the money available.
One thing that I observe from the outside that I see in the commercial community, in the commercial in-house community, that I don't see in the public sector in-house community, is a movement of people temporarily or sometimes permanently outside of the legal teams and into the commercial teams. And so, you know, someone who is in-house at a large corporate might spend some time actually out in the business doing, you know, doing something slightly different where they can use their skills in a slightly different capacity. I don't see so much of that in the public sector. I don't see public sector in-house lawyers going off to be, you know, the deputy chief executive for you know, policy or for something else, and to move backwards and forwards between that, which gives you a kind of career progression. And I don't know whether that's because of the way some of our public sector legal teams are structured, or whether it's a feature of the kind of people who select into those jobs, or a combination of both.
I imagine your mileage might vary in terms of each individual organisation. And it's part of it's about being really open to those opportunities as they present themselves. This was several years ago at Spark, there was some team changes happening, and I saw an opportunity outside the legal team and jumped into a strategic procurement role for a couple of years and got a lot out of it, but then realized I'd rather be a lawyer and went back to Spark Legal, which was quite good. And I think that mobility brings with it opportunity to grow yourself and also to figure out where you really want to be. Like, not all of us even want to be in-house lawyers for forever. I'm very happy at Spark. I'm very happy as an in-house lawyer, but the fact of the matter is that in-house lawyers are now able to bounce out into very senior commercial roles within the organisation and back into private practice quite readily, and that's happening a lot. We lost a workmate recently to a relatively big firm, and that is happening more and more as people just figure out what they want to do with their lives.
And apologies, everyone. I've just realised that that people in the audience can't see the questions. So there's been several requests for us to read out the question before we get the answer. So we won't backtrack, but we will bear that in mind in the future. And in fact, I have a question here for Joyce, and I will read the question out. For Joyce, what are the best things that senior lawyers she works with do to support her development?
Oh, I was actually just going to add to Hayden and Grant's both their comments. I think they missed a crucial part of when you're quite young in your professional career of the importance of having a mentor. I definitely chose the position I am in because that was offered as part of the package. I mean, my general counsel was happy to mentor me. I didn't want to be dropped in a sector where I was so brand new and there wasn't support for me out there. I mean, your peers can teach you the emotional support. I guess you need that's every day. It's really common for young professionals. But in terms of how you negotiate a matter or how you approach a matter, speak on the phone with someone who may be a little more difficult, that actually comes from pure mentorship. And I think that's actually a really attractive feature that probably exists more in New Zealand than it does overseas. I've heard some horror stories about Australian companies. But in New Zealand, it's definitely something we can definitely offer because we actually have that community in the legal profession that's actually willing to help and willing to take people on. And I think that's a great aspect that we should really be promoting.
Can I I apologize. I didn't read out that question. That was my fault. That was just in relation to the public sector and making sure that, how do you retain and recruit lawyers at that senior level with remuneration restrictions in place. But just to add to what Joyce said just then, I'm a real proponent of the Law Society's mentoring program. I am mentoring someone currently in Wellington at the minute. It's a great chance to give back, to learn, and to connect, and not just within your own team, within your own organisation, and you can get fresh ideas and insights. So if you haven't tried the Law Society's mentoring program, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, and I think mentoring programs, you almost get as much being a mentor as you do. I hate the word mentee, but as being a mentee. So
it sounds like something you would eat, a delicious treat that is bad for your teeth.
Great, so we've got some more questions coming through here. So moving across from private practice, 20 plus years experience, 12 years own law firm, what would be considered as PQE for in-house, working in the same field of law, entry level or more senior? It's probably one for you, Grant.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, I would take your full experience there. I wouldn't put you as at a junior level. That's for sure. Yeah, if it's in the same field of law, you would have the same. I mean, when I got hired into Telstra in Australia, for example, it was just based on my PQE in private practice. Same thing coming back to New Zealand, they just added the PQE up. So I mean, and you can kind of you have to kind of judge your own level of experience, right? So you can talk to your own experience and level of depth of expertise when you're interviewing for these particular roles, and you'll know sort of how deep your experience is.
And another one probably for you, Grant. Can you explain the hierarchy, different positions of in-house lawyers, legal counsel, senior legal counsel, special counsel, general counsel, more senior and leading the team?
Yeah, super duper senior counsel.
Yeah.
I think increasingly, and that's not the case for all organizations, but I think the job title, it's not the be all and end all. And I think especially, and so for example, Spark is an agile at scale organization. And so our roles are structured quite differently. And so you can be a legal business partner with like 2 years experience or 15 years experience based on the contribution model and the competency framework for that type of role in terms of your depth of experience. Yeah, so legal counsel, in-house counsel is probably a sort of generic descriptor. And obviously the senior counsel would indicate a more senior lawyer in that space. Special counsel, you wouldn't tend to have in an in-house team, I don't think. And then obviously assistant general counsel or general counsel. But so in an agile team, for example, you'd have like a legal business partner, a lead legal business partner, indicating that they're managing a team, and then the general counsel or assistant general counsel roles. But every team is different. Every team is different. It more matters what you do day to day, what your responsibilities are, and how you're rewarded for those responsibilities.
Okay, great. So now I'm going to wrap up with one question, which all of you will have an opportunity to answer. So in a nutshell, what do you think 2023 looks like for in-house lawyers in Aotearoa? Hayden, do you want to dive in first?
Sure. I think a continuation of a number of the things that we've seen. How do you do more with less? How do you demonstrate broader value across the organisation? The reality is that the international economic world is getting a bit more challenging. That will add demands on the in-house community. It'll add demands on the private practice community as well. I'm hoping that 2023 will mean that we get to see each other in person a bit more often than we've got used to, and that we can continue to build those links as a profession, continue to work on some of the stuff that we've talked about today.
Thanks, Hayden. How about you, Joyce?
For REINZ, I guess, or for me, I guess we're past a period of probably capitalizing on some economic growth. So in terms of what Real Estate Institute does, we're super member-centric, I guess you could call it. And in terms of that, I guess we follow what our members need. So for us, or for me, I'm learning that now is the opportunity to put infrastructure in and foundations in. Well, we're going through a more digital transformation over at REINZ, but in terms of allowing our members to grow. And I think as part of being an in-house lawyer, it just changes year, 6 monthly, 3 monthly. It's all part of the fun, but it's really an opportunity to build so that we don't get overworked next time something like COVID does happen. Everything's in place, so we're in the best position to be able to move forward.
Grant, you get the last word.
It's almost, and thinking of it's very more important what I don't say now rather than what I do. Like I think there's three things that I think are coming for us as in-house lawyers in 2023. First is growth. We're going to continue to see more in-house lawyers in New Zealand, and at some point there will be a maximum, I'm sure, but it also feels a little bit additive in the sense that there are more and more lawyers in New Zealand and more in-house lawyers. So it's not like there are less and less private practice lawyers, but you can continue to see growth in the number of lawyers at an absolute level practicing in-house in New Zealand. I think as well a continuation of the interest and application of more technology, more legal operations thinking around how we do our jobs. So not that you can just solve everything with technology, but thinking about how we work, why are we here, and therefore why, how might we best expend our precious finite legal resource in terms of the work that we do. And then finally, well-being and culture. And I think there's a real opportunity for New Zealand in-house teams, even if you're in a a wider workplace culture that can be a bit challenging or a bit elbows out, to create a real island of trust, support, kindness, where your in-house team members can really be there for each other, do great work together, and thrive as lawyers and as people. So I think there'll be an increasing focus on workplace culture and well-being within legal teams in-house.
Great. Well, that's a positive note to end our webinar. So make sure that you take a look at that toolkit and sign up for your free trial of practical law. But other than that, it just falls on me to say thank you on behalf of Thomson Reuters New Zealand and ILANZ to our fantastic panel. Ka kite anō. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.